At this point, we now have all 5 reasons available to us to prove that triangles are congruent. Side, 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 angle, side, where the angle's in between them, HL, hypotenuse leg, and then our new ones, angle, side, angle, or angle, angle, side. Both of these new ones will have 2 angles. It'll depend on where that third side is. Either it'll be in between the 2 angles, and we'll get angle, side, angle, or the side will not be in between them, and we'll get angle, angle, side. So let's see if we can prove that any of these triangles are congruent using any of these 5 reasons. And so as always, we want to take a look and see if there's any tick marks I can add to the diagram. In this first set of triangles, I can add tick marks here and here. I'll use a triple one since I already have a single and a double. And the reason I can add those is because those are vertical angles. So you may want to make note of the reason why you're adding those tick marks. That'll be very important for when we write proofs. So I have vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent. But that's all I'm able to add in this diagram. And so if I look, what I have set up is angle, angle, angle. I've got all 3 angles matched up but no sides. That is not one of the 5 reasons why triangles are congruent to each other. So these 2 triangles, I cannot prove that they are congruent to each other. It's not going to be possible. AAA is not a reason. In our next set of triangles, I can add a tick mark for the reflexive property. And again, you may want to make a note of why you added that tick mark. That'll be important for our proofs. So I can add a tick mark for reflexive property because they share that side. And now if I take a look, I have 2 angles marked and a side. So it should either be angle, side, angle, or angle, angle, side. Both of those have 2 A's and an S in them. Because that side is not in between these 2 angles, it is going to be an example of angle, angle, side. So yes, these triangles are congruent to each other because of angle, angle, side. If I move down to the bottom left, what might be helpful in this diagram is to draw the 2 triangles separately. So I have a triangle like that. I'm going to use this big one as my triangle. Sometimes it's hard to see which triangle I'm talking about. And then I'm going to use the one on the right as well. And so I can see they both have right angles in them. So I may be tempted to use HL just because I see that right angle, but just because you see a right angle doesn't necessarily mean it's HL. So let's see what else we've got. Both of these top angles are labeled as 60, so I can mark those as being congruent. And then I can actually add a tick mark for a side as well. This is where drawing them separately may be not as beneficial as looking at the original diagram. I can see that both triangles share that bottom side, and so again, because of the reflexive property, I can add a tick mark to that bottom side. They both have that in common. Once again, I have 2 angles marked and a side. This is definitely not HL because I don't have the hypotenuse. Once again, this is an example of angle, angle, side. I have 2 angles marked and the side that's not in between them. And then for our final set of triangles over here, once again, I want to see what tick marks I can add. I have vertical angles here in the center, angles that are across from each other. That's the only thing I can add. Once again, I have 2 angles marked. This time, notice where that side is. That side is smack dab in the middle of those 2 angles. So yes, these 2 triangles are congruent to each other, and our reason is going to be because of angle, side, angle. And for our last couple examples, let's focus again specifically on our new reasons, angle, side, angle, and angle, angle, side. These are the problems that ask us for an additional piece of information. So we're not going to be able to prove the triangles are congruent the way they are. The question is, what else would we need to know? And so here's something new we haven't seen before. In this case, I've got 2 parallel lines. That's what those 2 triangle tick marks mean. If you remember some things about parallel lines, let me draw these a little bit longer. Back when we had danced way a long time ago, we had talked about this angle and that angle being congruent to each other. And what we called those was we called them alternate interior angles. And what we said was true is that alternate interior angles are congruent. So here's a new reason we can add tick marks to diagrams, because we have alternate interior angles. Same is going to be true for these angles here. That one and that one, angle B and angle E, are also alternate interior angles. And so now to see what information is still needed to prove these triangles are congruent, if we think of like a little checklist, I have the 2 angles figured out, but I need that third side, and that third side has to be the side smack dab in between the 2 angles I marked. So in this case, I'm going to need angle or side AB congruent to side ED. And I don't know that that's true, but that's the question. What would I need to know? And that's what I would need to know. That answer would work for me. It turns out there's another way you could answer this question as well. Some of you may have realized we also have vertical angles. So I could use those, and then if I get rid of, let's erase, like maybe this one, oops, let's erase maybe that angle and that angle. If those are the two angles I'm looking at, I would need to know that BC and CE are congruent to get angle, side angle. So the point is not to confuse you, just to give you the idea that there's multiple ways you can answer these now that we have so many options available to us. Okay, let's do one more of these. This time let's do angle, angle, side. So I want two angles marked and the side not in between them. So using the diagram just as is, I have an angle and I have a side. I want to get another angle then matched up. And what I want to make sure happens is I don't want to get the side in between the two angles. That would be a different reason, although it would still work. Maybe I'll use those two angles. If I have this set up, I've got two angles matched up, the right angle and this angle, and that side is not in between them. And so what I'll do is, I think the easiest route would be to say angle U is congruent to angle W. That would be the additional piece of information I could use to prove these are congruent by angle, angle, side. It's not the only way to answer this question. Some of you may have realized there's a reflexive property I could add, and so there's many ways I could answer it, but just to keep things as simple as possible, let's do that. Angle U congruent to angle W.